We're going to continue on with how the body is organized. There's different levels of organization in the body, so there's a hierarchy. So we're going to start at the bottom with the smallest level of organization, the cell, and then we'll work our way up to the largest level, which will be the organ system. Make sure you know these definitions for these different levels of organization. And I know that you've had what cells are before. So remember that cells are the smallest living units of the body. And then if you take a group of cells of the same type and put them together, and they're working together to perform similar functions, that's called a tissue. And then if you put two or more tissue types that are working together to perform a specific function, that'll form an organ. And then organs that are working together to perform a specific function, that forms an organ system. So let's just take a look at some pictures of these different levels of organization in the body. So starting with our smallest level of organization, that would be the cell. And this happens to be an epithelial cell, which we'll talk about what that is in just a little bit. And then our next level up would be a tissue. So over here on the top right, we've got epithelial tissue, where we've just taken some of these epithelial cells and put a bunch of them together. And now we have epithelial tissue. So this is actually epithelial tissue that's lining the inside of your trachea. And we know that because there's some cilia that's out here. So we'll talk about that when we get to the respiratory system. And then if we take two or more tissue types that are working together to perform a function, that forms an organ. So on the bottom left, we've got a heart. So that's an example of an organ. And then organs that are working together to perform a function, that forms an organ system. So here we've got the urinary system. So we've got several different organs here. We've got the kidneys, we've got ureters, the bladder, urethra, and all of those will form the urinary system. All right, so we're just going to go through each of these different levels of organization, and we'll start at the bottom with the cells. And your body has over 200 different cell types. So it'd be really hard to learn all 200 different cell types. So to make things easier to study, we decided to just classify the cells based on their function. So what are they doing? And that's going to make it much easier to learn the cell types. So for example, these are all the same cell type based on their function. These are all neurons. Okay, they're all different neurons, but they all have the same function of communication. These are all different types of neurons that are actually found inside the brain. All right, so very important to memorize the four major classes of cells. So we're going to learn about the neurons. And then we'll talk about the muscle cells. And epithelial cells. And then our last type of cells are the connective tissue cells. Okay, remember that we came up with these four different classes of cells based on their function. So what are they doing in the body? All right, and if you memorize the four cell types, then it's really easy to remember the four tissue types. Because remember, a tissue is just composed of groups of cells that are similar, you put them together and they're going to perform a job, and that forms a tissue. So if you put a bunch of neurons that are alike together, you end up with nervous tissue. And then if you put a bunch of muscle cells together, you end up with muscle tissue. And if you put epithelial cells together, you end up with epithelial tissue. And then if you put connective tissue cells together, you get connective tissue. So if you know the cell types, you know the tissue types. All right, so let's go through the function of neurons and then also nervous tissue. So here are some neurons, and the function of neurons is communication. So they're there to convey messages to different areas of the body. And we'll talk about those more later when we talk about the nervous system. Okay, muscle cells, they can also be called muscle fibers. Their function is movement. Okay, so like if you think about walking around, your skeletal muscle cells contracting, they'll cause you to move. We also have other kinds of muscle cells. We'll also learn about smooth muscle cells and also cardiac muscle cells. And then epithelial cells, putting those together forms epithelial tissue, also called the epithelium. The epithelium is a sheet-like layer of cells that's supported by a basement membrane that's underneath. And the epithelial layer is going to line things in the body. So anything that's hollow inside the body is going to be lined with an epithelial layer. So if you think about the inside of your blood vessels, inside of your intestines and stomach, inside of your airways, your lungs, your heart, your bladder, any of the hollow areas inside your body are going to be lined with epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue also lines the outside of your body and makes up your skin as well. So that gives a very important function. The epithelial tissue forms a barrier. So it's going to separate the internal environment, what's inside our body, from the external environment. And so we'll talk about that in the next video. And then also, if we want to get things from the external environment to the internal environment or vice versa, we've got to get it across that epithelial layer. And so we've got to be able to do membrane transport. And so we'll have a whole chapter reviewing that as well. Okay, and the other thing that the epithelial cells will make up are the glands in your body. So both the exocrine glands and also the endocrine glands. So that'll give the other function for the epithelium, and that'll be glandular secretions. So the epithelial cells and epithelial tissue can be different thickness. It could just be one cell layer thick or maybe several cell layers thick. And it can also line the hollow areas inside your body, like maybe this is an intestine or a blood vessel. So it can also align that as well. And there's usually an underlying basement membrane as well. There's no cells in this basement membrane at all. It's kind of a non-cellular material. And then also very important to remember that all of the glands in your body are made out of epithelial cells. So glands can either be exocrine glands or endocrine glands. And if you look at the word exocrine, exo means outside and crine means to secrete. So exocrine glands, you recognize those because they have a duct. And they're going to secrete whatever it is they're making through this duct out into the external environment. And we'll talk about where the external environment is because sometimes it actually is inside your body. So we'll talk about that in the next video. Some examples of exocrine glands. So you think about your sweat glands, your sebaceous glands or oil glands on your skin. We also think about your tear glands or lacrimal glands, mammary glands that produce milk, salivary glands, mucus glands, which we find like in your nose, throughout your respiratory tract. We also find mucus glands in your stomach, reproductive tract as well. Exocrine glands also make up your gallbladder. And also pancreas has exocrine glands. They make the digestive enzymes there. Endocrine glands, also made from epithelial cells. Endo means within or inside, and crine means to secrete. Okay, and if you look at an endocrine gland, what's different? How is this different from an exocrine gland? So here's our endocrine gland here. So one big difference is you don't see a duct, right? So no duct. And the other big difference is these endocrine glands are going to secrete hormones to the inside of your body into the blood. So that's where endo is referring to, as you're secreting the hormones, the products they're producing into the blood, into the inside of your body. Okay, and we'll talk a lot about the endocrine system later on, and there's lots of examples of endocrine glands. So for example, your thyroid gland, your pancreas actually is both an exocrine and an endocrine gland. The endocrine part secretes the hormone insulin, for example. And there's a lot of other endocrine glands too, so we'll get back to that later. All right, connective tissue. Connective tissue is very diverse, as you'll see. And the functions of connective tissue, if you just remember connect, it's going to connect or link different body parts together. It anchors things, it supports body structures. So kind of a little bit of a broader definition here. And a lot of times connective tissue, you recognize it because there's an extracellular matrix. And this extracellular matrix is kind of a gel-like material, and it's made up of proteins and carbohydrates, and there's some water. And then the connective tissue cells are embedded in it. So some examples of connective tissue would be bone. And how bone fits the definition of connective tissue is that it's going to be used to anchor things. So muscles are anchored to the bone. And then bone is also very good at supporting body structures, right? Okay. Tendons Also another example of connective tissue, and it's going to connect or link muscle to bone, and then ligaments are going to connect bone to bone. Cartilage is going to support the bone, so it's going to prevent the bone from rubbing on each other. Fat is also connective tissue, and fat actually helps support body structures as well. And then blood cells and lymph, both of those are going to connect or link parts of the body together, because they will travel around the body and take things to different places in the body. So that's how they fit the definition of connective tissue. So here's just some pictures of connective tissue. We've got some different blood cells up here on the top, which we'll talk about what these are later. We've got some red blood cells on the left and some different types of white blood cells over here on the right. We've got some bone cells, which are connective tissue, and then we've got some fibroblasts, which make the extracellular matrix that's found in a lot of the connective tissue. And then this is just a picture of the extracellular matrix that is found in a lot of connective tissue. So this is looking at the connective tissue that's underneath your skin. And you can see we've got these fibroblasts here. They're making the extracellular matrix, which is all this light pink stuff, which is kind of a gel-like material. It's got some carbohydrates in there, kind of water, gel-like. And then also the fibroblasts are making all of these proteins. So like the collagen, which gives your skin the strength so it doesn't rip apart. These purple strands, which is the elastin in your skin, which allows it to bounce back and not wrinkle. And unfortunately, as you get older, your fibroblasts don't make as much collagen and elastin, and that's why your skin gets all thin and wrinkly and tears easily. So, but this would be connective tissue, all these cells embedded in this extracellular matrix. Okay, so we've done with our levels of organization, we've done the cells, and then we went up to the tissues where you put the similar cells together, working together to perform a function. And now we're going to go up to the organs where you have two or more tissue types working together to perform a specific function. So an example of an organ would be the heart. So we know that the heart has to have at least two different tissue types. So let's think about what type of tissue types you think you would find in the heart. So hopefully you said that there would be muscle tissue in the heart, which there certainly is a lot of cardiac muscle. And then the other type of tissue that's in the heart, there's certainly nervous tissue, because the heart is innervated by the autonomic nerves that will speed up or slow down your heart rate depending on what's going on. And we actually have more different tissue types in the heart as well, because the heart is hollow, right? So the chambers are going to be lined by epithelial tissue. And then the valves inside the heart are made out of connective tissue. So in the heart, we actually have all four tissue types that make it up. Okay, and then our last level of organization, our largest level, would be the organ system. So we've got several organs working together to perform a particular function in the body. And here we've got a picture of the urinary system. All right, so we're going to classify our organ systems based on their function or what they do. So let's take a look at the organ systems that are going to give us our form or shape and also allow us to move. So if you think about that, one that comes to mind would be our musculoskeletal system. Okay, and that includes both your muscles and your bones. So that will definitely give you your shape and also allow you to move around. And another one that helps give you your shape would be your skin, right? Okay, that helps keep you together. And your skin is called your integumentary system. Okay, another function for organ systems. They could be involved in obtaining, transporting, or discarding materials. So that could be, if you think about it, could be your respiratory system. Okay, and that would be involved in getting the oxygen in and getting rid of, discarding the carbon dioxide. And we also have our gastrointestinal system. Okay, getting the food and water in and then discarding things out the other end that you don't want, waste material. And then we've also got our urinary system. Okay, discarding waste material in the urine. And then we also have our cardiovascular system. And the big job for the cardiovascular system is to transport things around the body. Okay, move it from one area to another. Okay, this one is really important. Okay, controlling and integrating everything in the body, maintaining homeostasis, which we're going to talk about in another video. Pretty much you're directing everybody in the body what to do. There are two organ systems that are in charge of the body. So the two that are in charge of the body and maintaining homeostasis would be the nervous system and the endocrine system. So this is really important to know. Make sure you memorize this because we're going to keep coming back to this because it's really, really important to maintain homeostasis in the body. Okay, and the organ systems that are used for defense, protecting you, would be obviously your immune system. And then the other one would be your skin, your integumentary system. Okay, because your skin is going to prevent a lot of things from even getting inside your body. But if it does get inside your body, then your immune system is sitting there ready, waiting to go, something to get past your skin. And then the last one is easy. Reproduction would be your reproductive system. Okay, so it would be pretty important to know the functions of these organ systems. And this is table 1.1 from your book that summarizes the 10 organ systems and gives you some examples of the organs and tissues within the system, But I'm really looking for the functions right now, just having the big picture, and we'll get into some of the more details later on as we go through each of these. Okay, and then just remember, big picture, that the organ systems all interact with each other and depend on each other. And if you have one not working, it will affect other organ systems, okay, like we talked about in the first video. And then also there are some organs that belong to more than one organ system. So for example, the pancreas, which is located right below your stomach here. The pancreas, if you think about it, the two organ systems that it belongs to, it's part of your gastrointestinal system, because it does make digestive enzymes to help you break down your food. And it's also part of your endocrine system, because it does make hormones like insulin and glucagon, which we'll learn about later. And then your hypothalamus, which is located in your brain. It's right here in purple. It's right above the pituitary and right below the thalamus. The hypothalamus belongs to two organ systems. The obvious one is that it's part of the nervous system because it's part of your brain. And then it's also part of the endocrine system because it does produce hormones as well. So